Hello class, welcome to Unit 3.6b, Slope-Intercept form. Alright, looking at Slope-Intercept form, we are looking at y equals mx plus b. So let's just remember that m is our slope, b is our y-intercept, and the x, y points are really just any ordered pair. So basically, they are any values for x and y coming in pairs. Now we also want to remember that slope is also considered your rate of change, especially when we start working with word problems. And the y-intercept is your initial value or your beginning. So let's take a look at some examples. When we write equations in the slope-intercept form, the main two things we need are our slope and our y-intercept. So they're given to us in two different ways. If they give us that m equals 1/5, that is telling us a slope of 1/5. And b, the main thing we gotta look out for here is it positive or negative? So if it's a plus 2, our equation simply is y equals 1/5 x plus 2. If we look over here, they might spell it out for you and say slope instead of giving you the m, but same difference. Plug it in. And then if we look at our y-intercept, and again, the big thing here is now that b is a -4, we don't want to write plus a negative. We just want to leave that -3x minus 4. And that's it. Okay, pause here and practice these. Okay, check your work. Okay, example 2 of writing an equation from a graph. Once again, we are looking for y equals mx plus b. And the two things we are consistent with every problem is we are looking for our slope and our y-intercept, so our m and our b. Well, if we look closely, looks like b is equal to a -2. And then we also want to be able to find our slope. So make sure we scan up until we find a point that directly crosses. Make sure we count up. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Up 7 over 2. So our slope is 7/2. Plug those two into our equation. And our slope here is y equals 7/2 x minus 2. Over here, same thing. Oh, looks like our y-intercept is a 3. Go down to this point here. That looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over 1. So it looks like our slope is 6. Plug those two in, and our equation is y equals 6x plus 3. All right, take a minute to pause here and practice through a few. Okay, take a minute to check your work. Okay, example 3. A couple different looks here. In this case, we don't have a clear slope, or in our graph, we don't have a clear y-intercept. So what we need to remember is we do have a formula for y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. So when we start looking at our values, let's just call them x2, y2, x1, y1, which really doesn't matter which way we go with this. But the important part is if we do 4 minus 1, we need to do -2 minus 1. Take a minute here to simplify. And in this case, it looks like you've got 3 over -3, which really is a -1. But the problem is we don't have a y-intercept. So we need to pick a point. Doesn't matter which one of these 2 points we use, but 1, 1 looks like it's going to be easier to plug into our formula, the y equals mx plus b, so we can solve. So if y is 1, slope is -1, x was 1, the question is, what is b? So if that's -1 equals 1 plus b, now we just have an equation to solve. So solve for 1, that's 2, and b equals 2. Well, now we have b equals 2. If we look back up here, we had m equals -1. So now it's just a matter of plugging this in. Now, one thing to just kind of note here is if we plug in -1, oftentimes they will drop that -1, and you will see a final answer of y equals -x plus 2. If we look over here at the graph, we can see that y-intercept is kind of in the middle here. Nothing clear as far as what exactly that is, and we don't want to just guess that might be some type of half value or anything like that. So what we need to do is, first of all, find some points that would work. So right there looks like a nice value. Scan up through until we find another one that looks like right here, which that basically is going to tell us a rise of 3 and a run of 1, 2, 3, 4. So we could tell that our slope is 3/4. Other than that, the y-intercept we don't really know. So let's just take this point. That looks like an x value of 2, y value of 1. Well, if we just plug them in to our y equals mx plus b, what we can do then is say, well, 1 equals, our slope was 3/4, and our y value is 2 plus b. Well, use your calculator, plug them in. We've been focusing on that. That would really be, just a little side note over here, that would be 6/4, which would reduce to 3/2. And if we subtract 3/2 from both sides, 1 minus 3/2 is really going to equal a -1/2. So over here, we know b is equal to -1/2. So just kind of coming back up, way up top here, right here in the middle, y equals 3/4 x minus 1/2, and we have our equation. Take a minute here to pause and solve through these. Okay, a couple things to consider as you check your work is maybe you did x2, y2, maybe you switched up these two, so your order might not be, maybe it's -2 minus 3 and -4 plus 0, but either way we should end up with 5/4. And again, when you get to this point, I picked 0 out of 3 because anytime you work with 0, multiplying by 0 is going to be easier than trying to multiply by a -4. But either way, we should end up with the same y-intercept. Same thing goes with b. No matter what order you pick or what x, y value you plug in, we should end up with that y equals -3/5 x. And then over here again, remember, we have a nice slope, but whenever you see that y-intercept that is not crossing very nicely, we will want to solve for b to make sure we get the right point. Okay, let's move on. So last thing we're going to do is be writing these equations through word problems. And this is where we really want to focus on the fact that the slope is really like a rate and your y-intercept is really like your initial value, because you won't see slope and you won't see y-intercept anymore. So when we look through here, the initial fee to have a plumber come to your house is $75. So right there with initial, we already know that B is equal to 75. And when we look for our rate, this is $40 per hour. A lot of times these rates are indicated by the word per. So that's your labor. So once we have these values, now we can go back and plug them in. So it's 40x plus 75. And this is also where we can kind of look at, identifying these values, where x is going to be equal to your hours and y would equal your total cost. All right, if we look at example B, we have a skydiver jumps from 18,000 feet and falls at an average rate of 160. Well, right there, rate was going to be m. We know we're jumping from initial height of 18,000. Now we do want to make sure we look out for the word fall, which is going to indicate that we are falling or going negative 160 feet. Now this should probably say something like 160 feet per second. But when we go plug this in, this is going to tell us negative 160x plus 18,000. And now we have our function where x is going to end up being a second, and our y would be our height, or our total height. And that's what we're looking for. So take a look at practice 4 and solve those now. Pause here before you check your work. Okay, how did we do?